Hello everyone, what's up? This is Diego Praveri and you're watching The Link, your go-to stop to learn about e-commerce right from the source, with first-hand information from the brilliant people behind all innovation in e-commerce. This podcast intention is to bring the most relevant people in the e-commerce space to talk about where e-commerce is now and where e-commerce is going in the near future with all the changes that have been happening in the past 2-3 years. Today we're going to talk about empowering customers with information, going beyond customer service and customer support with Michael Potters, who's the Strategic Partnership Manager at Gorgias. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Diego.
No, it's a pleasure. So Michael, first, can you introduce yourself? And we've had previous conversations about you and your relationship with Gorgias. So I want you to tell our audience, what was your journey? Because you were a merchant, an e-commerce merchant before joining the Gorgias team, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know the struggle, that's for sure. It is not easy being a merchant. I was a merchant actually for 6 years before I joined Gorgias. Entrepreneur, founder, CEO, we had a team. Over a 6-year period, I think we went through 3 different complete site redesigns. E-commerce grew and changed dramatically within that 6 years. So we were exposed to so many different tools and challenges and, market conditions. It was a very interesting journey. And of course, we were acquired just at the end of midway through the pandemic, I want to say. So maybe the first year of the pandemic, it was at the end of 2020. So of course, around that time, things were really changing as well. I mean, you guys know it just as well as I do, and I'm sure everyone in the audience knows as well. That was a crazy year. What a roller coaster that was.
Definitely.
So we were acquired in December of 2020, and we were actually customers of Gorgias. And if you don't know already, Gorgias is a customer support help desk. It's a ticketing system built specifically for e-commerce merchants. And as you might know, as an e-commerce merchant, those tools that have been sort of like the legacy tools that have been available to merchants for so long, they're sort of the usual suspects. You might know the names, like the Zendesks and the Freshdesks of the world. We don't want to crap all over those guys. They're the 800-pound gorilla help desk system, right? They built this ticketing system for airlines and telecommunications and banks and services businesses. But and as a merchant, they were sort of the only game in town for a really long time, and we were challenged by that because it wasn't built specifically for our use case and our needs. So we used Zendesk, we used Freshdesk. At one point, we were managing everything out of a single email inbox. Early on in the business, of course, that's the only way to do it. We were also we managed we were using live chat as a point solution for ages. And we actually thought, for the longest time, we actually thought that live chat was going to be the solution to everything.
Yeah.
We're like, we need to have a solution for customer support. We'll just get a live chat widget on the site, and that will sort it all out. And then we can carry on and
have someone suffering from the other side, right?
Yeah,
suffering,
exactly.
Answering to everyone.
Yeah, someone really suffering. Yeah. So we were using live chat as a point solution, and so and it was expensive. You had all these different tools that different licenses trying to solve this headache that was customer support. And who was affected the most? It was our customers.
Customers, definitely.
They were the ones that were suffering. We suffered a bit because it was a headache, but the ones that really suffered were the customers that we were trying to help, because they were waiting, over 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours, sometimes in the worst cases, like up to 3 or 4 days to get a response to something as simple as, where is my order? These are questions that should require simple answers, but if you don't have the tools to answer those questions, it becomes a nightmare. So anyway, that was and then 6 months later, after we were acquired, long story short, I joined Gorgias. I knew that there were other merchants just like me that had similar challenges. I wanted to get into the weeds with it and help them where I could. And now I get to work with agency partners like Tivano that are have a similar vision, a similar alignment. We're we're working together to solve problems for merchants, and this is certainly one of them.
Yeah, definitely. Let me get 2 steps back, and I would like to understand
Yeah.
like why a customer support platform? Like, what is a customer support platform, and what are the problems that you can solve with a customer support platform? Because I want to take something that you mentioned about Freshdesk or Zendesk. That what I've perceived is that when Gorgias came to play, it was a breaking point between the old way of customer support and the new way of customer support. So can you tell us a little bit about like platform agnostic, what is customer support and why is it critical
Sure.
for e-commerce?
Yeah, so customer support begins where your customers want to ask questions. It's simple as that. So like customer support is on every single channel that you can think of. It's are you have to ask yourself, are people asking questions on social media? Are people wanting to get answers over phone? Are people looking to get answers over email or live chat or SMS? Where the question is, where are your customers looking for answers?
And
So
it's
that's where, yeah, that's what customer support is. And that, to answer your question, Diego, where a customer support solution comes in, and in this particular case with Gorgias, is a solution that aggregates all of those channels into one place for you.
exactly the customer journey has multiple touch points,
Exactly.
right? So
Exactly.
So tell me, because that's a big problem, right? And like you were saying before, when with your e-commerce, you were trying to solve that problem for the customers because those were the most affected ones. So how does Gorgias come to solve that problem and aggregates everything in one dashboard?
Yeah. Let's take it back one step. The first thing to know is that Gorgias is natively integrated into your platform of choice. Magento, BigCommerce, Shopify. We also have a NetSuite integration. So by virtue of that, we're actually able to so now you have a sort of, at a baseline, you have all of that customer information in this customer support console. You're equipping your customer support team with the information that they need about that customer in order to deliver a personalized response. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that those same customers are asking questions across all those different channels that I mentioned. And as you said, Diego, across every single point of that buyer journey, pre-sale and post-sale. So it's channel agnostic. Every single channel, they're gonna have questions that they need to have answered. And it's so important that you answer them quickly.
Quickly, right? Speed, velocity is of essence here, right?
It's so important. If you've been in sales, you know, Diego, you know, you've been there, and I'm sure a lot of people. I mean, if you have an e-commerce store of any size, you're in sales.
Definitely.
Effectively.
Everyone says.
And everyone knows, in order to, if you want to close a deal, if you want to, you know, make the business if you want to be successful with this prospect, you have to deliver them answers quickly. Otherwise, they'll probably go somewhere else, or they'll lose interest in the product. You know, like that. Right, there's a window of opportunity that you kind of have to play within, and it's no different in e-commerce.
You know what? It's funny because when I was preparing this conversation and reading more about Gorgias, because let me tell you, I'm a fan of Gorgias already, right? Like
Cool.
it blows my mind that it really goes much further than just customer service and customer support. You can create a personalized experience for your customers, and there's something that comes to the mix that it's customer experience. Right? And this brings me to this Maya Angelou quote that at the end, people don't care about what you said or what you did. They care about how you made them feel, right? And that, I believe that's what customer experience brings to the table, right? So can you tell me about like how Gorgias, with all the personalization and all the automation, can start building that customer experience that will bring revenue at the end of the day?
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about, like, you know, there's these pre-sale moments, and then there's the post-sale moments. So the pre-sale moments as we've said, it's so important to be fast because there's a window of opportunity. Maybe this customer is browsing the site, so and they're considering a purchase. So in order to deliver them like an exceptional customer experience, we need to deliver them the information that they are looking for about a particular product. For example, you know, like if you're selling cosmetics or something, or if anything for that matter, I don't know, you could be selling bicycles. You know, if I went to go buy a bicycle, I would have 100 different questions.
Yeah.
If I want to go, if I want to know if I was buying cosmetics or something, you know, I would have 100 different questions. I want to know, like, what ingredients, where are you sourcing it from? What's the process for producing? And now more than ever, people have a lot of questions because there's so much competition. So in order to differentiate, you have to deliver a rock solid customer experience, and it's about the velocity of the response and the delight that it brings. Or, you know, it's not even like, this is actually something that we studied. It was something we studied internally at Gorgias because we wanted to know, like, what is indeed an exceptional customer experience. And what's interesting, and this is actually a misconception about the customer experience. For so long, we thought about, you know, surprise and delight, how important surprise and delight is. But what you actually see in the data is that surprise and delight is maybe a part of it, but it's a very small part of the story. What actually delights customers is the speed of resolution and the fullness of that resolution, like the accuracy of that resolution. If your customer has to wait for a response and they get inaccurate information, or they have to be passed around to a different agent and it's an impersonal experience, that is the furthest thing from surprising and delighting. In fact, that's the opposite of a good customer experience. So this is the pre-purchase customer experience. I mean, there's parts of that, of course, that you can apply to post-purchase as well. But let's shift gears now to the post-purchase experience. So now you actually have a customer. They purchase something. 30% of those customers are actually going to ask, where is my order?
Order status.
30%.
Queries. Yeah.
So order status. We actually have a word for it internally. It's called WISMO. I mean, it's an acronym. It's not a word. WISMO, WISMO. Where is my order? 30% of all inbound support inquiries are related to order status. So those 30% of your customers are going to ask. So how are you going to be able to respond? If you're not responding in the same, you know, if you're not delivering them a quick answer, something that's accurate, something that's personalized on all those different channels that I mentioned, you know, of course, there's going to be some channels that are more frequented. You know, email is a very popular channel, of course, but that doesn't mean that customers aren't going to be asking on social media, or they might pick up the phone. You know, you have to have all these channels covered, otherwise things are going to be falling through the cracks. So 30% of those customers are going to be coming back and asking for a status related or an order status related questions. And now more than ever in 2022, and I'm sure we'll expect to see it in 2023, you know, there's supply chain issues, there's sometimes product quality issues, there's issues left, right, and center. So we have to be able to manage there's returns. People want to return things. We got to be able to manage that effectively, you know, and efficiently. You know, so pre-sale and post-sale, every single part of that customer buyer journey. And Diego, the other thing too is in 2022 and 2023, and even moving forward, you know, we know now how expensive it is to acquire a customer in the first place.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's ever been more expensive. Like I'm actually hearing, I follow a few guys on Twitter and girls on Twitter that, you know, are really active within the D2C and just generally in the e-commerce community. And some people are even suggesting that it's like, this might be the most challenging time in e-commerce because we had this flood of merchants coming into e-commerce during the pandemic, and then you had simultaneously all these challenges with iOS. Yeah. And you know, and now it's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's certainly more expensive now to, you know, have a good picture of the customer on social media, and attribution is really difficult. You know, and now we have these supply chain issues, right? We're sort of wrapped on a nice little bow on top of this package of, you know what, you know, it's been really challenging for merchants, and it's going to be even more challenging. So what does that mean for the merchant in 2022 and 2023? It's never been more important to deliver an exceptional customer experience, because now once you've acquired the customer, it's so expensive that you finally acquired them, or even they finally landed on your website and they're browsing. Now it's never been more important that you can actually, deliver them the answers that they need, move them from consideration to purchase, provide the answers that they need so that you can effectively upsell or cross-sell. These are the buying moments pre-purchase and post-purchase, in fact, that are so critical now in 2022 and moving forward.
Yeah, so from what you're saying, right, it's a customer support, a solid customer support platform, omni-channel platform like Gorgias will impact not just in the conversion rates that it will impact, but it's going to impact in the customer lifetime value. It's going to impact as well in retention, right? And it's going to impact in average order value. So tell me, I've been reading how you use this flywheel, this customer support flywheel, right? That I'll mention it quickly. It's about unify, personalize, automate, and sell, right? Can you walk us through that flywheel? Because it's really interesting how it's not just answering questions, right? It's helping, it's providing a customer experience. And at the end of the day, you can sell with customer support.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about that flywheel is that as a merchant, there's maybe sometimes like a misconception. I don't know if it's a misconception. Maybe it's like in your imagination. Maybe it's sort of just like you have to do it a bunch of times before you realize just how hard it is. But a lot of merchants, and I was guilty of this for the longest time, and I'm probably still am, that you stand up a website and then you kind of just like set it and forget it, or you design the product, right? The physical product, like the actual the thing that you're selling. You design this thing and you put it online and you're like, okay, all right, we're here, and you're expecting the customers to come and they're just going to buy this thing. Having an e-commerce store is a constant iterative process. Like, it can't just be stand it up and forget it. It's like, you've got to be thinking about how am I going to improve conversion rates, but also how am I going to improve the product itself? Something
that we say over here at Tevano, that there's nothing such as a finished e-commerce website, right? So it's once you're finished, you're finished. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
That's
exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and I mean, it's not just what's interesting too is that it's not just the site. That's why the business operations side is so interesting. Like the website is one thing, but the product itself is like something else you got to think about. It's like, or even your labor inputs. How effective is your support team?
Yeah,
we have to be measuring them. We have to be measuring them as well. We have to be measuring every single thing about the business. The business operations is equally important as the conversions and everything else that we're LTV, AOV, ROAS, everything else that we're measuring on the website itself. We also have to be thinking about like the business side of it. Like, how is the product itself performing?
Yeah.
Is it a good product? Is it easily damaged? Is it arriving broken on when it gets to the customer? Is our support team is our labor really that efficient? Can we make optimizations there? It's so important that you measure every single thing.
And with automation, it helps you reduce hiring, and it also helps you make them more savvy about the products. I was reading a case study about a very well-known brand, right, with tech products that actually in the case study, it was mentioning that, the questions from the customers who were tech savvy, maybe it wasn't easy for a customer support that just joined the company to answer. So they had to go back to the team and stuff. So by building macros and by building automations, right, they were able to resolve those tickets like lightning fast, right? And provide the right answers to the customers, right?
It's so true. I mean, like, and those macros, and what's interesting too is that not only is there this whole library of macros that are available to those agents, but they don't have to go tab shuffling or copying and pasting. They're hyper accurate because it's fully natively integrated into not only your platform, but all those third-party apps that I said. So like, it's kind of plug and play in a lot of ways. Then these agents, we're saving them a ton of time. Yeah, it's crazy. We released a report in January of this year. One of our partners, GoTo, it's a third party, they actually were using both Zendesk and Gorgias. They are a third-party outsourcer. They outsource, your customer support sort of labor part of your business to a third party. And a lot of companies do this, and it's for good reason actually, because what we actually see internally, those merchants that have outsourced their labor, like their actual customer support labor, the people behind the screen answering the questions, when they outsource it, it improves the CSAT score. Like it's better for the business to actually outsource because these are professionals, of course, right? Anyway, so GoTo released this report, right? They studied 800,000 tickets side by side. Gorgias tickets, or Gorgias agents, I should say. Though I shouldn't say Gorgias agents. Those agents that were using Gorgias, and those agents that were using Zendesk. So they measured those tickets side by side, 800,000 tickets, and what they determined conclusively is that Gorgias agents were 30% more efficient with their time than Zendesk users. So what does that actually mean for the merchant? That means that if you choose a legacy help desk platform, it's effectively like saying, I'm willing to spend 30% more on labor for a tool that isn't really built for me. That's crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned the CSAT score, right? It's very interesting how you can measure customer satisfaction. And maybe we can go a little bit deeper on that. Like how important, and you mentioned this before, but how important it's speed, right? On that customer satisfaction, right? And that's kind of the leading indicator that you're increasing your CSAT score, right?
It always is. It's always speed. Like I said, it's not about surprise and delight. It's about speed. It's the speed of resolution. It's the speed of resolution. It's always the speed of resolution. And what's interesting is that there are so many questions that we can actually just deflect and give an answer right away. You don't ever need to talk to an agent. Where's my order is a great example of that. I mean, you and I, Diego, who shopped online, and a lot, and like a ton. We shop online all the time. I mean, and those in the audience are the same. And we know how important it is to get a speedy resolution. And there are some questions that you just want an answer right away. You don't even need to speak to anyone. You just want to self-serve. Where is my order? Or what's your return policy? Or where do you ship? Questions that are so repetitive and don't require any human intervention. Like the expectation is that I could just get that answer right away.
Yeah, most questions are the same through like every industry, every vertical, right?
Exactly.
I always think that I always say that how important speed is, right, and reduce friction. That you're not just competing with your direct competitors, like you're competing with a phone call from the shopper's mom. You know what I mean? You're about to buy, so if you're not up to speed, you're going to lose them for whatever, live, social media, a phone call, work, whatever. So it's very interesting how you manage the speed, how you can automate, right, those ticket resolutions. And I want to touch on something, Michael, that I find really, really amazing, like all this artificial intelligence coming in, all these algos, how you're, putting together the algos, and how you can identify the intent and the sentiment, right, in Gorgias, to be able to prioritize high buyer intent over other, more regular questions.
I know, this is crazy, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, for sure. So this applies to social media specifically. So on Facebook, Instagram DMs, comments, if there's an interaction happening on Facebook, what we don't want to have is anything falling through the cracks. And what we're able to do with Gorgias is detect positive buying intent and basically act, you triage it as if it's like a lead. As if it's like a lead that you're nurturing towards a conversion. If they're expressing positive buying intent, then it's basically turning browsers into buyers. Like you want to convert that browser into a buyer. So if they're saying like, I really like, or they comment on an ad and they're like, "Well, this looks really cool." We don't want to let that fall through the cracks. That's money on the table, baby. Let's put it in our pocket. And it's the same with. It's interesting too because we can also detect negative sentiment. So again, this goes back to this iterative flywheel, this iterative part of our business. you know, we can detect negative sentiment. So if someone says this looks ugly, or this is, I don't like this product, this is dumb, something like that. This happens all the time. I mean, like, you guys have seen this when you're running ads. Like, people, there's just some bad people, and there's also people that actually have genuine concerns about things. So, it's important that we identify that negative sentiment, and we triage it, and we behave, and we equip our support team with everything that they need to manage those things effectively.
What I found is that Gorgias automation capabilities, right, allow you to create this very robust customer experience on any e-commerce site, right?
Yeah, let's talk quick. And you mentioned too, Diego, the Klaviyo and Yotpo integrations, because it's worth maybe spending a couple of minutes
Definitely.
here.
I was going to go to that.
Yeah, so with the Klaviyo integration, it's really interesting. So you mentioned earlier, Diego, like, being proactive with customer support, and sort of like when customer support, basically with Gorgias, in a lot of ways, customer support becomes a function of your marketing, and marketing becomes a function of customer support. And both of those things become an extension of your sales team. Like, it's really becomes it's one unit in a way. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
It's just one sort of like team, right? So if we're integrating natively into Klaviyo, for example, now Klaviyo has SMS, right? And of course, email is like their bread and butter, but now they have SMS as well. So now you have these outbound marketing campaigns coming from, that are in your inbox, and you're receiving SMS campaigns from Klaviyo, for example. Okay, so we're doing these outbound campaigns. These are moments to engage with the customer, of course, right? But what it needs to be is actually a two-way conversation, or at least it should be an option. We should be able to have a two-way conversation over email that isn't just stuck in an inbox somewhere that the customer support team has to, manage separately from everything else, and it's not integrated with anything. It's living sort of in a siloed inbox somewhere. No, it should like those communications, those outbound sort of proactive marketing communications, are also opportunities to have an actual conversation with the customer when the customer wants it. Of course, we don't want to force it on the customer, but when the customer has questions, we should be able to collect that conversation and manage it in a way systematically and efficiently that provides an exceptional customer experience to that customer, a personalized one, and something that's really efficient.
It's part of that omni-channel experience, right? And
exactly.
And Michael, mentioning Klaviyo, right?
Yeah.
I want you maybe to explain our audience like how you can use the intent detection technology to create segments. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's a big one as well.
Mm-hmm. So every ticket that's tagged in Gorgias, so every ticket that comes into Gorgias is tagged, right? I mentioned this already. So our machine learning is detecting, intents and sentiments, and actually tagging the ticket, right? So what we can actually do with that Klaviyo integration, and maybe I should step back a moment. We built our own Klaviyo integration. Gorgias built our own Klaviyo integration, and it was great. Klaviyo is now and has been a very strong partner of Gorgias for a very long time, and they actually rebuilt the integration. And both sides resource this integration. Now this integration is like crazy. This is like a world-class, like crazy integration. It's so cool what it can do for merchants. So now that we're tagging these tickets, what we can actually do is we can push that data back into Klaviyo to further enrich those segments and lists and automations. So tickets that are tagged a certain way, or customers, that are tagged a certain way, can receive certain automations, or can be automatically enrolled in certain lists.
That's gold.
So there's really rich segmentation and email automations that we can build based on that customer engagement information and tagging that's taking place. Yeah, no, it's really we're also collecting. So that's sort of like the two-way Klaviyo tagging, or at least pushing Gorgias data back into Klaviyo to enrich the segments and lists and automations. And as I mentioned, Klaviyo as our SMS, we're also collecting all of those responses that are coming in from Klaviyo SMS in Gorgias, and we're able to respond to them. And it's pushing right back out through Klaviyo.
Yeah, so that's something that we're really trying to help our customers with, right? Because we're Klaviyo partners as well. We're Gorgias partners, Klaviyo partners, Yotpo partners, and making our customers understand it's not just your e-commerce, it's the integrations, but making sure that you don't build a hairball of integrations, right? That everything works seamlessly one with the other, right? And I think it's something, I don't know what you think about this, but I think it's something that where where e-commerce is going, to allow integrations, robust APIs and allow integrations. So you, Gorgias, you're gonna do the best in customer support. You, Klaviyo, you're gonna do the best in email and SMS. Yotpo, you're gonna do the best in reviews and UGC. So those integrations and those partnerships that different platforms have between each other, like really help the customers and will really help us scale their e-commerce business.
100%. There's sort of like there's like the usual suspects. There's like a few tools, and certainly as a merchant, you become very familiar with which ones.
We're coming to an end right now. I would like you to tell.
Wow, that flew by. Oh my god.
Yeah. No, and I have so many other subjects to touch with you. It's really it's kind of infinite in a way. But I would like you. What would you say to someone, to an e-commerce merchant, that does not have a customer support platform, right? Or that they having like this, like the old school platforms, right? Like someone suffering, like we said at the beginning, suffering and responding. Like, what are they losing on?
Yeah, there's really two buckets of cost to think about. Like yesterday, the first bucket of cost is the actual cost of lost labor efficiency. So as I said, if you're using a legacy help desk, it's at least 30% loss efficiency in labor, and that might be your own labor, by the way. So depending on the size of your business, it could actually be your own labor. So maybe where do you want to be prioritizing your time? I can tell you that you probably don't want to be prioritizing 30% of your time on questions that are repetitive and the customer wants a quick answer anyway. So that labor cost is a huge sunk cost that a lot of merchants don't think about and ought to think about. So if we can, and if it's a fixed cost, okay, nobody wants to fire anyone. So if it's a fixed cost, what do you want to do with that 30% labor savings?
What we want to do is take the bandwidth that we've now saved with those automations and shift it to product related questions, like questions that are actually related to revenue. Okay, so that's the first bucket. That's just like pure like labor savings and optimization. The second thing that you've got to be thinking about if you're a merchant today is how am I going to be driving revenue through this, in fact, the single most important channel for the customer, that is customer support. There's a lot of money being left on the table for merchants.
Loads.
Loads. And if we can fully optimize the customer support experience and we can deliver exceptional customer experiences that are not, as I said, surprise and delight, but rather, efficiency of resolution and getting in front of the customer with the information that they need when they need it. Now we're actually taking that money that is on the table right now in your business. If you're listening to this, I promise you that there is money that's being left on the table that you could capture if you had a more efficient solution for customer support that can deliver value to your customers. There's a lot of money there on the table, and we have playbooks, as I said, and you said, Diego, like that we're sort of like standing on the shoulders of giants before us that have done it before. They know how to do it, and our team is there to help you do it as well.
Yeah, no, I can definitely guarantee that if you're not having a robust customer support platform, you're leaving money on the table, like lots of money. But not just the revenue and not just the labor savings, like increasing lifetime value from your customers, decreasing customer acquisition costs, increasing average order value. Like I kind of see it how this customer support new way of doing business matches with email in a way, and why Klaviyo is so important. That Klaviyo Gorgias integration is so important because you're gonna hold them and you're not gonna let them lose like through all of the customer journey. So that's really
I couldn't have said it better. Like that is so true. It's not just like that cross-selling and upselling and like driving revenue in the moment and capturing those dollars when the customer's on the website, but it's also once you've actually made the customer, once they're your customer, you want to keep them.
And feedback, like you mentioned that. Feedback, make your product better, but make the experience better, make everything better. That's really amazing. So Michael, time flies when we're talking about something that you have a lot of passion for. So we're coming to an end, but I want to mention to our audience that we're preparing a webinar, right? We're preparing a webinar together that we're going to call it How to Create an Exceptional Customer Experience, 3 Trends for 2022. We're actually in the midst of getting everything ready. We do not have a date already, but we're going to share that in the links of the description. So follow us. Where can people follow you, Michael?
Follow me on LinkedIn. You can also send me an email, Michael, michael.potters@gorgias.com. If you're interested in checking out Gorgias, talk to the Tovano team. And make sure to take advantage of some of the offers that we would offer through our relationship with Tovano. So talk to Diego, talk to whoever is your point of contact at Tovano, and make sure to get in touch. If you're on Zendesk, even more reason, or like as I said, a legacy help desk, even more reason to get in touch sooner than later. We'll actually buy out that entire Zendesk contract.
Well, that's let me do a PS there, right? Explain how you do that, because I think that's a very aggressive, in a good way, strategy. Like so basically you're gonna pay for the rest of the contract on Zendesk that they have?
That's right.
Okay, so if you're on Zendesk and you're doubting that your contract is not ending maybe in 3 months,
that's right.
Come and speak with Gorgias that they're gonna buy. Perfect, I love it.
Yes, sir.
That's actually having a confidence in what you do and knowing that you can guarantee results, right? You wouldn't do that if it was another way.
100%. Yeah, 100%. In fact, I should mention before we jump off here, 35% of our merchants have actually migrated from Zendesk to Gorgias.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay, Michael, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been an honor to have you. So that's it for this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Spotify and all of our socials, and we'll have all of the relevant information in the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in another episode of The Link, E-Commerce Connections. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.